Good morning. Welcome everybody to another Cybercrime Magazine video podcast. We're very excited today. We have a unique interview with Anita D'Amico. Welcome.
Thank you.
Anita, you are the CEO of a company called Code DX. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what Code DX does?
Sure. Code DX stands for Code Diagnosis, and we help diagnose problems, specifically security problems, in software code. And we are in an area called application security, which finds and fixes vulnerabilities in software before an attacker can exploit them. So Code DX is a system that automates many of the manpower-intensive processes that are used in application security.
So Code DX is part of a cyber division of Northport's largest employer, Applied Visions. And that is called Secure Decisions. So how long have Applied Visions been here and Secure Decisions?
So Code DX is a spin-out of Applied Visions. Code DX is a separate company. It's a C Corp, and I'm the CEO of that organization. It was spun out of Applied Visions, and specifically the Secure Decisions division of Applied Visions. Applied Visions is a custom software development company in Northport. We're the largest employer in Northport. And I run the Secure Decisions division, which does cybersecurity research and technology development.
How many staff do you have working with you specifically for this program?
Well, in Applied Visions, we have about 65 people, and at any one time, about 20 of them will be working on Secure Decisions R&D projects. We work in the area of cybersecurity education and in application security research. Those are the two primary areas.
It's really interesting. It's a very innovative company. I want to talk about that. But first, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself, your background? Are you a Northport native?
I am not a Northport native. I am a Philly girl.
Well, how did you get from Philadelphia to New York to study psychology and get a PhD?
When I was very young, I was the smart girl in the class that didn't fit in. And I really felt intellectually stifled. Mm-hmm. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school where they didn't even offer calculus, because why would girls need to learn calculus?
Right.
And so I had decided early on that my ticket out was a good education. And I applied to some very good schools. I got into all of them. I wound up going to the University of Pennsylvania, and I got a degree in psychology. And I decided that I still didn't feel as though I was going to be able to escape this stifling environment with just this bachelor's degree in psychology. And I really wanted to make a career. And so I just looked and said, what could I do? And I decided to get a PhD in psychology.
Right.
And I wound up going to Delphi University on Long Island. That's how I wound up on Long Island. And to me, finishing my dissertation was my way of ensuring that I would remain in an intellectually exciting area. That doesn't mean I forgot my roots.
Right.
I am very much a Philly girl.
Yes.
And,
yes.
From the old neighborhood.
Right.
And so if you work with me, you'll learn that pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. You can throw down.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so by background, I am an experimental psychologist who wandered into cybersecurity more than 20 years ago when I was working at Northrop Grumman. Through an unusual series of events, I wound up starting the first information warfare team at Northrop Grumman and set up the business objectives for that organization.
That's amazing. Tell me a little bit about that, the information warfare team. What was that?
Well, at the time, this was in the 90s, and cybersecurity was not a well-known area. In fact,
brand new.
And a lot of the work was being done in the government, and it was called information warfare. Now you know it as cyber warfare.
Right.
And I started the first information warfare team at Northrop Grumman to determine the direction that the company would go. I did that for a while under the research organization, and then I was recruited away from Northrop Grumman by this company called Applied Visions, where I started the Secure Decisions division. I called it Secure Decisions because I wanted to have a human component in the title. I wanted it to be about security, but I also wanted it to emphasize the importance of decision making in cybersecurity. And so I called it Secure Decisions because our technology helps you make secure decisions.
That's really interesting. And then you also are a mom.
I am. I have a son in his 30s.
Yep. And so you were early on in cybersecurity, one of the only females working in cybersecurity. And we are doing a lot of research and just wanted to ask you if anything's changed since you started, and if so, how much or how little, and how did you kind of balance being a mom and working in this kind of heavily technical and serious industry?
Well, I've been around long enough to being the only woman in an entire area. I worked in the Merchant Marine originally.
Wow.
Doing shipping research, and there would be 100 men and me. Then I moved into manned space, and I was working on the space station program where there were 50 men and me. And so coming into cybersecurity, there were a lot more women. If there were 10%, that was a lot more than what I was used to. And it has changed over the years. There are more women entering the field. I think it's easier than it used to be as well. You asked about being a mom. When I had my son, literally, there was no option for part-time work. You were either full-time or you were put into the pool, which was mostly administrators and secretaries. And I was the first woman at Grumman at the time to be part-time technical.
Interesting. So the reason I'm asking and bringing this up is because I hear from a lot of people that cybersecurity is a very good industry for women who are re-entering the workforce to go into, that there's so many jobs available and training available. Would you agree with that?
I think cybersecurity is an excellent area to go into for anybody because there is a shortfall of people who are skilled in this area. But it takes a while to become an expert in cybersecurity. And it's not something that you pick up very quickly. Mm-hmm. So if somebody wants to make a career change, they can do that and go into cybersecurity. But you're going to spend 3 or 4 years learning about it.
Learning, absolutely.
That's right.
So I wanted to talk about your work now as kind of the rainmaker at Secure Decisions and your CEO of CodeDX. You are in charge of the business development. You're a working CEO, a selling CEO, so to speak. So how does that work for you? How have you made such a successful business out of this? What's the key to the successful business development we're seeing?
Well, first, let me explain the relationship between Secure Decisions and CodeDX. Secure Decisions does cybersecurity research that is primarily funded by the government. We get funds from the U.S. Air Force Research Lab, from DARPA, from the Department of Homeland Security, from a variety of government organizations who want to spawn new technologies in cyber defense. And so I actively bid and win those in Secure Decisions. Mm-hmm. I've won more than $20 million in grants from the government to develop innovative cybersecurity technologies. What we do with that is we look to see what can be commercialized, because the government is very interested in making sure that the technologies that are developed get used in operations, both in government and industry. Mm-hmm. So I then cherry pick the technologies from Secure Decisions and I commercialize them selectively. So everything related to software security or application security, I bring over to CodeDX and I move the intellectual property from Secure Decisions over to CodeDX. And in CodeDX, I sell product. And it's a different type of business development than doing research, but equally challenging.
How long does the process take for you to, win the bid and then go to patent that intellectual property and create the product with CodeDX product to then commercialize?
It could take years. So first of all, to bid an R&D project, you have to have a concept or an idea of something that's innovative. It typically you start with something like a white paper, a 3-page white paper that you present to somebody. If they like it, they ask for a 25-page proposal, and then you get your funding. This could take over a year just to get the funding. And then it will take a couple of years sometimes to develop the technology and have it ready as a minimum viable product to be moved over for commercialization. So we started the CodeDX technology development more than 8 years ago. It started out as a $99,000 6-month proof of concept that was funded by the Department of Homeland Security. And now 8 years later, it's the leading application security management system, and it's used in commercial organizations as well as government agencies.
Application security is one of the fastest growing markets in cybersecurity. Most of the people I talk to do work with network security and infrastructure, securing that. But application security is growing so fast. What can you tell me a little bit about the market growth?
Well, application security is one of the fastest growing areas of cybersecurity. The compound annual growth rate is 26% compared to network security, where the compound annual growth rate is about 5%. And the reason it's growing is because of data breaches.
Yeah.
We all are familiar with data breaches like Equifax. What many don't know is that most of these breaches start with an attacker exploiting a software vulnerability. To an attacker, a vulnerability is an easy way of getting into an enterprise. Application security finds and fixes those vulnerabilities before an attacker can exploit them. So it is a good way of securing your entire enterprise by securing the software applications that are in that enterprise.
So once you work with a client, whether it's public sector or private sector, how many applications can CodeDX work with?
Oh, it can work with hundreds or thousands.
Just a universal across the board for the
Right.
company?
CodeDX actually works with a lot of other application security tools. It integrates with source code analyzers, pen testing tools, something called software composition analyzers, which find the vulnerabilities in third-party libraries. It brings in manual code reviews. So all of these very disjointed processes that are used in application security are brought together in CodeDX, where we help make sense of the data and deliver it in a form that is actionable for remediation of the vulnerabilities.
How many companies or institutions could you estimate use CodeDX right now?
We have about 50 customers.
And where do you think that, what kind of industries are they in?
Most of our customers are in regulated industries like healthcare and finance, as well as in the government. Our customers are concerned about ensuring that their software is secure. So if they are concerned about a data breach or the integrity of their software, or they're regulated by laws like HIPAA or PCI, then they would be a very good candidate for CodeDX. So most of our customers are either Fortune 1000 or government agencies or aerospace companies that are supporting the government agencies.
Well, it sounds very important. Sounds very critical to their security, to their cybersecurity. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about your background in human behavior and experimental psychology and your research background. How has that helped form your career and your insight into good business development?
So first of all, let's talk about good business development. I have found over the many years that no matter what type of business development I'm doing, whether I'm trying to develop a new technology or I'm selling to CodeDX to a new financial institution, the key are two things. One is building relationships. Business is done by relationships. And somebody that you know a decade ago will come back into your sphere. And if you had a positive relationship with that person, it's going to influence the business in a positive way. And they will remember. The second thing is candor and basically honesty. I don't say I can do something that I know I can't. I don't overpromise. And if I say I will do something, I will deliver on it. And people remember that over the years. I run into people now that I knew 20 years ago, and they remember doing business with me, and they're willing to do business with me again because of that.
That's excellent advice.
And then with respect to the psychological research.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I want to know more about that.
So people, when they meet me, they go, "Oh, you were an experimental psychologist. You really have insight into people because of that." I do have insight into people, but I don't think it's because of my psychological background. I think it's just something that I've learned over the years. But what psychological research prepares you for are a few things that are important. One is that when you're studying human behavior, you're studying something that is inherently somewhat unpredictable. People don't conform to laws or principles. They vary just because they want to be different. And so when you're studying human behavior, you have to be comfortable with gray areas or ambiguity and be willing to move forward even when you don't understand everything and you can't predict everything. So being comfortable with ambiguity has really helped me. The second thing about psychological research is that you're often dealing with concepts that are not necessarily inherently understood by people. So, for example, emotional intelligence. People now talk about emotional intelligence as though it always existed. It's a concept that's maybe only a decade old, and it's a word that people now use.
It's part of our vocabulary.
It's part of your vocabulary. But before that, it was this group of concepts that you sort of kind of knew what it was. So psychologists are able to put language on something that is difficult to understand. And I have found that helps me. The third thing is that it gives you a systematic way of studying behavior and just studying things that are ambiguous. And I found that to be very, very helpful to me in my career.
So something new that is a new spin-off of, I believe it was Code DX, is something called Comic Bee.
Okay, Comic Bee is not on the Code DX side. So there are two organizations that I'm affiliated with.
Okay.
Secure Decisions is a cybersecurity R&D organization.
Yes.
And then from that, we spun out Code DX to
Right.
commercialize application security. And I'm the CEO of Code DX. We do have some very interesting technologies back in the lab at Secure Decisions. And one of them is a technology called Comic Bee.
So this is a completely new spin-off from the Secure Decisions Lab.
It's in the lab now, and we're looking at the best way of commercializing it.
Interesting.
What Comic Bee does is, first of all, it's a cybersecurity education tool that uses the branching comics, something like Choose Your Own Adventure comic strips, to help people to understand the different courses of action they can take when dealing with a cybersecurity dilemma. So you may present in the comic strip that you have received a phishing email, and you're given a couple of choices. Do you A, click on it, B, delete it, C, report it, those types of things. Depending on what choice you take, the story will evolve in a different direction. And in this way, through these branching comics, middle schoolers as well as people who of all ages can see the results of risk-taking behavior without actually engaging in the risk-taking behavior. They'll play out the story. Another way it's used is to teach kids about cybersecurity careers. So we'll present a cybercrime and say there are 4 different people working on the cybercrime. There's the forensic analyst, there's the incident responder, there's the law enforcement official. And then depending on which role they choose, the story plays out in a different way from that individual's perspective. So
That sounds like fun.
we're now testing it with
When can I
middle
test
schoolers. Come on, walk on down the street and we'd be happy to show it to you.
I would love to. So before we go, Anita, would love to hear about people who have influenced you in your career.
I wouldn't say there's a single individual who has influenced me, but a series of individuals. I am a woman that came up at a time when there were virtually no women. And it's really important for women to bootstrap each other, but I've got to give credit to the men early in my career who saw something in me. I did not fit the mold. I wasn't a man. I wasn't an engineer. I was this research psychologist that had this ability to take very complex concepts and distill them into things that people could understand and to work with very smart people. And early on in my career, my male managers saw that in me. And they would select me to do something that was hard to do. And they would tell me that I could do it. And they gave me confidence in my ability to do it. And they would support me. And I was very fortunate early in my career to have a series of men who managed me and saw things in me that I didn't know existed. And I thank them for that. And I, in turn, like to look at people that I work with who may not fit the mold. They may have a background in anthropology, and yet, they have some curiosity about cybersecurity, and so they get involved in that. And I like to support that. So I think that one of the keys to my success has been people seeing in me something that I didn't see in myself, and I, in turn, want to pay that forward by giving people who don't necessarily fit the mold a chance to succeed.
That's fantastic. So when it comes to cybersecurity, you do hear that it is intellectually stimulating, that you have to have that kind of curious mind and want to solve problems. So if there's anybody listening, a young person or female or male, it doesn't matter, what would you tell them about getting into this field if they have that kind of intellectual drive?
So there have been studies of what makes a good cybersecurity analyst. And what's interesting about those studies is that it's not your engineering background. Rather, the studies indicate that the most successful cybersecurity analysts are those that have curiosity, tenacity, and like to solve puzzles. So if you are one of those people that has intellectual curiosity, likes to solve puzzles, and is tenacious, then there may be a role for you in cybersecurity.
So you have this Philly grit and this working class background, and you've made it here to Northport as the CEO of this very interesting and important company in Northport. And because of that, you are protecting applications in hospitals, in the government, in financial institutions, in aerospace, very important areas. And it's just really a great story to see a local business doing so much important work.
Thank you.
And I thank you for coming down today.